I gathered players from different countries around the world, and in this video, they're gonna be duking it out for a grand prize of 2,000 gems and the title of Best Country at Brawl Stars. Shout out to Leo for supporting the channel. First up was the USA, represented by Blizz, going up against Canada, represented by Perry. It was a best of 3 to see who could land the most gene pools across the river, and right off the bat, USA was struggling to gain any control.
Ooh, that's 1 point for Perry already.
Like Justin Trudeau pulling all of USA's immigrants to their country, Perry was pulling USA's gene to his side over and over and over again.
It's a double pull, but the winner comes out as Perry.
And while USA did put up a fight in round 2,
okay,
Canada was simply too strong of an opponent to win against. And that's because Perry was actually a very experienced player, and understandably a lot of people in the tournament were already afraid of him. Well, all except for Mr. Spam of Portugal, who seemed itching to beat Perry in a fight. And they will meet each other later in this video, so if you're part of my 22% American audience, here's the guy to root for. Mongolia ended up getting a walkover to the next round since none of the 3 Hong Kong players showed up at the game. France versus Belgium were up next in a game of bush roulette, where players picked a bush to stand in and took turns trying to guess where the other player was. The entire game was actually incredibly close, with many shots hit and missed, but at literally the last second, France managed to fire a shot that clipped Belgium of his last bit of health. While I was sorting the countries that applied for the tournament, I realized that I accidentally left in some duplicates, so rather than unfairly remove them, I came up with a better idea. The duplicates would fight to decide who would move forwards in the competition representing their country, and the first duplicate match was between the 2 Indians, Proji and ABK. The game was grapple race, where both players had to get to the island in the middle using Buzz's gadget. Proji ended up winning the first game thanks to ABK getting stuck on the second island, but ABK slapped him right back with an easy win in the second round. And as round 3 began, Proji found himself getting delayed on the spikes and missing his first grapple, allowing ABK to soar ahead. From that point on, ABK had no competition, easily making his way to the center island and becoming the representative for India. India was actually supposed to go against the winner between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, but neither of these players showed up, leaving India as the dominating force of the South Asian region. Neither of the UK players showed up either, which meant Australia also received a walkover to the next round. The next game was Ukraine versus Russia, and it is here that I must note that I made matchups between these neighboring countries in order to minimize regional delay, not for any other reason, alright? Ukraine and Russia side each other up, both only allowed to use their charged attack to knock the other into the fog, but Ukraine was much better at baiting Russia into his swings and knocking Russia back into the smoke. Russia managed to get a massive hit on Ukraine in round 2, but thanks to Graveyard Shift, Ukraine hit Russia right back. Russia knew he was on the ropes and had to get the lead back, but Ukraine copied Russia's earlier tactic and dodged the first swing before swooping back in for the kill. Across the world in South America, Venezuela and Brazil were ready for their contest. It was a survival game, with the goal being to not get killed by me, the hunter. I guess that someone might be hiding in a corner, so I checked if I could find someone, and sure enough, I did. My corner checking didn't work in round 2, so I had to move around a lot more, but soon I was able to find my next victim. Venezuela got lucky, but in order to get to the next round, they actually had to beat another country first. But we'll get to that in just a moment. The face-off between Wodski and Stefano to see who would represent the Netherlands kicked off in a game of tightrope, where the first player to step out of the bush path loses. Wodski broke a rule in round 1, so I had to give the win to Stefano. In round 2, he ended up slipping at the first turn, leaving Stefano moving on to the next round. Hungary received a walkover as the Slovenian player did not show up. Bulgaria and North Macedonia found themselves in a cage Shelly 1v1, which Bulgaria won decisively, masterfully outplaying North Macedonia at the last moment. I mentioned that Venezuela had one more opponent to beat, and it was now time. Mateo from Venezuela was about to face off against Perry from Canada. And before the game even started, things were getting really heated up in the Discord VC.
You should definitely use Frank.
He's boring, bro. Like,
no, there is no way you just called him boring. Alright, that's it. I'm winning no matter what.
oh no!
So for Venezuela versus Canada, I made a game called Hat or No Hat. The plays would go Frank versus Mortis. Each hit was worth 1 point for Frank, and each dodge was worth 1 point for Mortis. The first round ended with Perry at a massive lead of 10-7, switching their brawlers. Mateo knew that in order to win, he would have to sweat a lot.
Oh my god.
Perry once again took the victory and would be the one moving on from the Americas. Glitches from Singapore faced off against Dandy Stuff from Vietnam in a game of drafted duels, where it was basically regular duels. The players picked their comps earlier, just like in a game of Power League. The Cordelia's pick worked great as a mech counter in round 1, leaving Singapore poised to win. But Vietnam managed to snatch the victory back in a really close nanny play in the next game. But Vietnam wasn't done yet and continued his carnage in the next round. On the back foot suddenly, Glitches had to take the Nani out here or it would be the end for Singapore. It was a heated battle down to the last HP, but Vietnam's pressure towards the final moments was far too much and Singapore ended up dying to the gas. Vietnam's next opponent was Indonesia, but their absence meant Vietnam got a pass to the next round. In fact, Solstice from Spain and this Norwegian player whose name looks like my Wi-Fi password also didn't show up, giving Portugal and Sweden a free win for the next round as well. Two people who did show up were Greece represented by Rones and Italy represented by Teseo. Greece and Italy faced off in a classic game of primo wrestling, where the main goal was to throw your opponent out of the rings as many times as possible. Round 1 was incredibly passive, the first successful throw going to the side of Italy, where he fantastically countered Greece's failed attempt. Greece actually did manage to get 1 point in round 1, but by the end, Italy was the clear winner with a 2-1 lead. Round 2 once again began with an Italian throw. However, Greece then proceeded to masterfully pound a 4-1 lead into Italy by the time the round ended, giving the land of pizza no chance to get a second point. The third round only began to get heated towards the very end, but it didn't matter because at the last minute, Italy used his super, which was against the rules of the game, leaving Greece as the victor. Germany was a no-show as well, so Poland was up next against the home of Brawl Stars itself, Finland. Both players had to take out their targets before the other, and it surprisingly ended pretty fast, with Finland taking a clean victory over the land of the Poles. Jordan's opponent Iraq wasn't anywhere to be seen, so I gave Jordan the win. If you're wondering why Africa isn't in this tournament, well, they are. But Egypt was absent, meaning that Algeria stood as the only African representative standing against Lebanon from the Middle East. The game for the Algerian Bibmet and the Lebanese Youssef was mortis fencing, a simple game of killing the opponent's mortis without using anything but your main attack. The first round was actually incredibly back and forth with no clear sign of domination from either player, but Algeria did manage to weaken Lebanon enough to land the victory. Not willing to give in, Lebanon dominated the second round, playing carefully to make maximum use of the graveyard shift modifier, and matched 1-1, both players readied for the final round. And with that, we had our top 16, and in another 3 rounds, one of these countries will be taking home the grand prize of 2,000 gems and the bragging rights that came with it. Oh, and if you're enjoying the video so far, then a like would be greatly appreciated. Our first round of 16 game was between Mongolia's Pinkaminto and India, and the game was a best of 3 penalty shootout. Mongolia was wildly off with her first goal, which ABK quickly took advantage of. Pinkaminto did equalize the score, but ABK had the lead in turns and won round 1. Game 2 was a 1-1, but this time Pinkaminto had the turn advantage, pushing the game to a third and final round. ABK led game 3 with the first goal, but Pink had no issues equalizing. However, the nerves seemed to have got to ABK because he missed his shot, and now India was put in the dangerous position of being eliminated. Pink fired her next goal but was blocked by the sharp India. And here it was, ABK's chance to take India to the next round. India was through as the first quarter finalist. Algeria got a walkover here because his opponent France didn't show up on time. Australia had to take on Hungary in a game of mortis to the middle, which was essentially musical chairs. Suffice to say, Australia won that on a feather bed. Finland was unable to show up, allowing Sweden another easy win to the rounds ahead. We were drawing ever close to the fated game between the Portuguese Mr. Spam and the Canadian Perry. However, we still had 3 more games before we can get there. Greece versus Jordan was a game of duck season. I was the duck, they were the hunters, and their job was to hunt me. I forgot to turn on the top dog modifier, so no one ended up killing me in the first round, but Jordan managed to land the most hits, so I gave the win to Hamza. Round 2 was a lot more intense than the first one, but the Nani pick chipping away at my health actually worked against Jordan, since all Runes had to do was land 1 shot to win. Tied once again, it was time for round 3, and even though the vision gear was banned, Greece managed to read my movements like a psychic and absolutely destroyed any chance Jordan had of winning. Belgium faced off against Netherlands next, a game of Carls where you could only damage with the flying hook gadget. And from the get-go, the Dutch Stefano's focus was completely off as he kept firing his shot too early, conceding easy hits to the Belgian player. The final game before Portugal versus Canada was Vietnam versus Ukraine. Dandy was the first runner, and his goal was to get to the middle of the map without getting killed. He actually avoided the middle, assuming Ukraine would be hiding there, but apparently Ukraine was completely lost and wandering around aimlessly. Round 2 began with the roles swapped, and while Ukraine tried the same strategy Dandy did, the Vietnamese man was actually ready to receive Ukraine at the neck of the central bush. It was time for the fated Game 8 between Mr. Spam and Canada. After a quick setup, we were ready to go. The first skirmish was fast, but Canada's quick reactions allowed him to steamroll Portugal in the first round. Portugal needed this next win to push it to a third and final decisive round. Train post ready, they began. And it was done! Portugal had done what everyone had thought was impossible and actually beaten the behemoth of Canada. By the way guys, I ran out of coffee while making this video and now I have no energy to keep doing YouTube. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ZH. Every dollar you spend energizes me for the next video. I also have a Patreon, but more about that at the end of this video. The first duo to make a step to the next round was India and Algeria. The objective was to survive under fire from a Jessie turret. India was definitely a lot bolder than Algeria, but this boldness proved to be a fatal mistake as it only drew more fire away from his opponent. India made one final attempt to escape the onslaught, but unfortunately it wasn't going to help him save his final drops of health as Algeria triumphed in the first quarter-final game. Bullseye of Sweden found himself in Mr. Spam's shoes of needing to take out a Masters player. The two Lola egos entered round 1 in a fierce clash, but in the end Sweden managed to take the win, pulling Australia into a second round. Round 2, played on a smaller map this time, saw Sweden land the first hits, denting his Masters opponent, and from that point on it was downhill for Australia, with Sweden slowly but surely chipping away at his health. And as the smoke rolled in, Australia had to make a suicide charge in an attempt to win. At a high from his win against Perry, Mr. Spam had to play a game of Sprout Dodgeball against Greece. What began as a slow but steady lead for Portugal soon became a nightmare as Greece once again showed the same resolve from his game against Italy and dominated his opponent. Determined not to fail, Mr. Spam played his next game a lot more tactfully and managed to draw Greece into a final bomb that gained him the victory he needed. Round 3 was a lot more aggressive than both the previous rounds. Mr. Spam, knocked down to his last 530 HP, could only claw for a victory that was never going to come. And then there was Vietnam and Belgium, locking horns in a battle of Dynajump hurdles. This was a breeze for Vietnam. Dandy was a much more capable Dynajumper than Belgium was, allowing him to cruise his way forwards, while Belgium struggled to even stay inside the track. The win was almost unfair. And with that, we finally had our top 4 contestants, one of whom was going to walk away with the coveted final prize. The semi-finals, we decided to do a 4-way Bruce Brawl. Armed with their favorite skins, except for this guy, our players entered the game. There they were, our finalists Dandy of Vietnam and Bibmed of Algeria. The stage was set for the grand final, Daryl Super Only 1v1 Maze. The game started out slow, both players tense, waiting for their opponent's next move. Vietnam grabbed the HP advantage, but it was soon equalized with Algeria's next attack. Vietnam's reply to the third super exchange was not as good, and Vietnam was on the back foot now. But for some reason, Algeria ended up missing his fourth super, and Vietnam suddenly had a chance to take back the lead. But all Vietnam's attack managed to do was bring both of them to the same level. After a perfectly synchronized exchange, both of them were still at level HP. Someone needed to make a change since the gas was closing in fast, and that someone was gonna be Vietnam. But he misses his super, and Algeria immediately makes him pay for it. The gas ever closer, it was coming down to the final few exchanges before the end. Congratulations Vietnam for that incredibly close victory.